Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Graham, and today on the Investor's Guide to Joy, we're going to be interviewing Matt King. Matt King is the CEO of GoBundance. He also runs David Osborne's family office and has become a good friend over the past couple of years. So today we're going to go through two main pieces in this podcast. The first is going to be the 6 stages or sort of steps in the Guide to Joy. So understanding more about yourself, doing controlled trials, and we talk about a number of different big controlled trials that he's done, going through uncontrolled trials, right, when life just kind of slaps you in the face, then loving the walk, right, being consistent, being patient, then being a ruler in your life, in the role of your household, your community, your career, and ruling over with leadership and what that looks like and feels like to not only do it, but also what it feels like and looks like for other people to be in it as well. And then the last stage is going to be sage and giving back and curating based on what you know and learned and have accumulated. The next piece is going to be the different stages and steps of 6, 7, and 8-figure earners, as well as we touch on 9-figure earners as well, right? How do they think? What actions do they take? How long are they consistent in those actions to get to some of the levels that they are? We go through a number of different things. We go really in depth. It was great that, I know Matt for the capacity I have and for the years I have to go into more depth of this piece. Also, want to give a shout out for the individuals who have high income taxes this year. There's a fund I've been raising for and connecting investors to for oil and gas, getting 80 to 100% depreciation to offset the high income, as well as getting healthy cash flow too, right? So this last fund, we were able to get in 31% annualized returns, right? So if you're a high income earner and are curious about offsetting your taxes with passive cash flow that's not real estate, and that you don't have tenants, toilets, and termites, reach out to me. Would love to chat with you more about that, see if it'd be something valuable to your portfolio. But that is the intro here. Next, we are going to go into the show, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thanks for being here. I want you, because I think it'd be amazing if you told us, like, where are we right now, sitting on rocking chairs?
Yeah, look, man, thank you for being here, right?
Yeah.
I just came to where I always go. So we're at our ranch, our family ranch. We bought it about 3 months ago.
Cool.
And is a part of the vision and the dream for a while.
Okay.
Really, I'm on this mission, Paul, to make memories in my life.
Yeah.
And I have 2 young kids, a third one on the way.
Yep.
And my biggest fear is that they'll just be attached to their screens and they won't understand the power of hard work. Okay. And so I knew that if I wanted them to understand the power of hard work and get away from screens, I had to create an environment by which they could do that.
Certainly.
The other thing is my in-laws are some incredible people from the Midwest, but they're from a small town and they didn't really want to move. And so I, kept asking my father-in-law, like, why not just move down here? My wife's an only child. What are you guys waiting for? And he's like, well, I'm kind of worried I'm going to get bored. And so I was like, oh, I know what will keep you busy. 20 acres of overgrown pasture, animals, projects that are endless.
Yeah.
But a place and a space that they can call their own so they don't feel like they're impeding on us when they're down here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did all this for was for the memories, for my in-laws to come down. But what I missed or what I failed to recognize was through this whole process of how much I would enjoy it.
Cool.
And so, just the name of this podcast, you talk about joy, right?
Yeah.
And I think as we're on this mission of life, we lose sight of what truly brings us joy. Mm-hmm. And you look at a 5-year-old, for instance, and they're finding joy constantly. You look at a 35-year-old and they're dreading the Mondays and they're frustrated with the paying the bills and they're like not finding joy in their life. They're not giving themselves permission. And so what the ranch has been for me personally has been just a place to have joy, right? To take a vision and make it a reality, to redo fences and bring open pastures and bring animals in and build barns and do different things. And like literally play like the game Sims. I don't know if you remember the game Sims growing up. Like play it in real life. So like, oh, what about a barn there? And that'd be cool if we had animals that were being bred here and this and that. And so it's just been really cool to see the amount of joy it's brought, not only others, but myself.
Sure.
And so it's really fun to be doing a podcast out here. Part of the vision was to do more stuff out here in nature, get out of the office, get out of those stuffy podcast studios and get to a place where like just creativity and energy can flow. So very grateful you're here today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was a cool kind of thought of Haley, myself, and Holly of just being like, okay, like, so I've listened to probably like 10 or 15 hours of your voice this week, like on, different interviews. We won't tell you the feeling. But, and I've been around you a healthy amount, right? Through GoBundance, through your inner circle, things like that. I have a bunch of your quotes at this point, almost like tattooed on my body.
but it's just to say like, it's typically like in front of a camera with headphones or not, and like someone made a comment of like, you're always in a different place.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool.
Yeah,
Different
I'm always
place.
in a different place.
Yeah.
I am always in a different place. And like Haley and the team just kill me because it's usually like a shitty Holiday Inn with like a junky bed behind me. Like I have no spatial awareness around what's going on. Like
Sure.
because I'm not doing this for a living. I'm just doing this to give value.
Yeah.
But I'm also doing it like David taught me this. Like when you speak, it holds you in alignment with your words.
Mm-hmm.
And so from an integrity perspective, when I do podcasts or I have these conversations with people like yourself,
Yeah.
I can't preach one thing and then go live a different thing.
Yeah,
and
certainly.
so like I never really am at a home base for all of them.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, there's a podcast today. Okay, cool. Well, where's a quiet private space? And it's
Sure.
this random room or this hotel or this whatever. And
Yeah.
you know, the vision and the dream is it's more of these kinds of environments where it's just
Yeah.
like free. It's creative, but it will always be changing because you might see chickens in the background, or you might see a cattle in the background, or you might see a dog in the background.
Sure.
And it's just a different energy. So
yeah, and it's in a lot of ways like the bigger story of like seeing life, you know, flow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I would also say, and something to like highlight, because something like we've done, like you've showed us, right, is like how to do like your 5 core values, right? And so then I would say like, hey, like action is a value of yours, authenticity is a value of yours,
Yep.
to the point that if the background's X, Y, Z, like that may not be an inherent, you know, value that relates kind of to it, right? Of what you're making, like some of those decisions. So it's then to say, I recognize for myself, like I'm not the marketing guy. I can do it, right? Like I recently heard you mention like Instagram's not on your phone. You don't really do it. It's just like, hey, can you post this or do this kind of stuff, right? Kind of the season like I'm at, where it's just like, I can do it, but just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Right.
And it's been a beautiful journey of going from like I to we to actually from like a faith perspective, I'm actually going to like a he of like, what does the universe or God or call it, you know, what you want, like have or want or have an interest for me to do.
Yeah.
Okay, like let's go do that, or how do I go do that, or why do I keep getting these thoughts or feelings to go do this? Like, is that even possible? Or it is possible, but like who's going to come with me along the way, right? Doing the empire expander kind of exercise and things like that. And I've found really like exercises have been like the most powerful, impactful way to take like the subconscious and like really bring it into the present, such that I can like recognize and understand like what's then not only possible, but like who I am and like where I'm going.
Yeah.
Another exercise also being vision, right? So it's cool to see then like vision sort of piece of like, you know, what's a unexpected or random or you know, seemingly challenging thing you could do, but would be like fun to do anyways, kind of thing.
Absolutely,
right?
man. 100%.
Yeah. 100%. And I mean, there have even been some like challenging things that I don't understand, right? Like you've done 0929.
Yeah,
sort
29,
of stuff.
029.
Yeah. Like mahalo. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So it's just like it's also cool to then have those different like aspects of different levels of how people are playing, or even I've said the tempo of people that are playing. You can do 1 podcast a week, or you do 5.
Yeah.
That's the action, but there's also a tempo like
that's right.
piece
that's
to
right.
it.
And it's interesting because there's this whole concept of pace, right? The pace at which we move through life, the pace at which we do the podcast, the pace at which we chase our vision.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this beautiful balance called grace. And I'm not necessarily as good at the grace part. But I'm now playing with this concept of like, why does grace have to suffer from pace? Like they can be mutually exclusive or mutually inexclusive, right? And so like what I'm trying to focus on now is not changing my pace, but doing it with a little bit more grace. And so trying to be a little bit more structured and calculated in just the actions I take, because action's great. Action breeds momentum, and momentum certainly. I think is gold.
Yeah, drive the car.
But action with grace will, I believe, breed even greater momentum. And so now I'm playing with this new concept of like pace and grace, and how do those two things marry one another such that you can have even more abundance in your life.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing too recently, where it's like, am I like working hard to the point of say like exhaustion because I believe I have to, or there's a forcingness to it, or that's just maybe what's required on this day or like in this season, but it's not to the detriment of like my relationships or my health. It's just, hey, like I pushed a little bit too much today. Like that's why at least where I wear my Whoop, I'm not sure if you wear the same, where it's like, hey, you need to go to bed earlier. It's like, got it, noted, right? You need to slow down a little bit more. Got it, noted. Hey, you can push a little bit more today. Amazing. Is that something I need to do or want to do, as well as do my goals align with that? Just because I can hit a 13, 14 strain today, does that mean I do? Type thing.
Spot on. You're spot on, man.
So it's cool to see like how, you know, the vision has kind of come to be for the ranch here. One thing I've not necessarily seen a lot of is it's kind of just like Matt's born, Matt didn't go to college, go abundance and on. And then everyone wants to ask you like, where's the real estate market going? Where's all this stuff?
Yeah.
All these things. You know, and in some ways, like almost just ask you like a question and maybe like get you
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I'd love to just hear like what kind of was childhood like and life like,
Yeah.
and how has it been reflecting on like where you're at today, maybe like ranch and other things
Mm-hmm.
compared to where you were. Because part of my then journey is also to share like I used to be a very consumptious, anxious, like stress, like kind of person that was so hyper focused on action of the strategy,
Yeah.
not of like maybe making the phone calls or things like that. That's not always the case.
Right.
But it's been a very healing piece to then be like, yo, let's do the things that like actually serve me for the vision. Am I doing the right things that actually move the ball down the field? Of then brings this concept of joy of like, amazing, you have the $10 million net worth. I don't know about you, but like I've been in rooms in GoBundance where like dude had like $7 million in net worth and was breaking his back, like literally and metaphorically, to try to create a family office, like for themselves. Or actually, he was like 23. It was the guy next to him. Anyways, money.
Yeah.
And it was like, we were all just like, do you really need to create your own family office for the people who actually don't, like your family members who don't actually like care that you need to? And it's like, no, it's like gotta be done. And there was just that limit of like, if you lose yourself, like what else do you have, like kind of thing. So curious of just how you've just like seen and grow through life from, you know, Midwest to kind of now.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a great question, and my childhood was great. I'm very, very fortunate. I have incredible parents.
Yeah.
They just moved down to Austin and retired down here to be by the grandkids.
Cool.
And like really, they sacrificed a ton so that my sister and I could do what we wanted to do. And I didn't know it in the moment, but now looking backwards, I see all the sacrifices they made for us.
Sure.
I remember one year my sister just wanted a horse for Christmas. Like she was riding a horse for 4-H and they were going to sell the horse. And she was just like totally like distraught. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, but it was like probably like 10 or whatever. And I remember like my sister just crying in her room and just like wanting this horse and wanting this horse. And it was like, I don't know, it was like $2,000 or $3,000. Like animals aren't cheap, right?
Yeah, sure.
And she was just devastated. And I remember walking into my my parents' room and I was just like, I don't need anything for Christmas. Just get her the horse. Like I don't want to see my family that sad or that broken.
Sure.
And sure enough, on Christmas morning in the backyard was the horse for my sister, right? So my parents have always sacrificed themselves for us, which is just such a gift that I didn't recognize in the moment. Growing up, I played a lot of sports. So I was a wrestler and a soccer player. And I've always really sort of found peace in the buck stopping with me. So in wrestling, it's one-on-one, right? You can't look to the team, you can't look to the quarterback, like you really can't look to the coach. It's on you. And in soccer, I was the goalie. And,
cool.
You
Me
know,
too.
Most people at 5'6" aren't the goalie. But I loved the pressure.
Have you always been 5'6"?
No, I was way shorter. But the pressure of that, like I just thrived in, and I loved knowing that I had the ability to find the way or make the way to whatever I wanted, whatever I desired, right? And so, you know, growing up, sports was a huge part of our lives. But I think probably the greatest gift my parents gave me is they showed me that if you want something, go get it. And I tell the story all the time. Like I remember I wanted to order pizza one night. It was like a Friday night, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, I want Domino's." And I will never forget. She like goes into the cabinet, pulls out the phone book, drops it on the table, and says, "Figure it out." And I'll never forget like trying to read a phone book for the first time, right? And like calling Domino's as like a 10-year-old kid, going like, I'd like to place an order for delivery, which means I had to know my address and what my order was and answer the questions. You want a hand toss or thing like so? Like she showed me if you want something, go get it. And I've just sort of like embodied that in everything I do. I really believe in the power of mastery. And so when I try to get into something, like I get into it all the way to really understand it, to really own it, so that I have control over where it's going for me and my family and our vision. You know, I have a sister who's way freaking smarter than me, way more talented than I am. She went to West Point. She has 2 master's degrees. Like she's just brilliant. And she's younger than me. And then, like I said, I have great parents, had really good friends, still to this day have great friends. And just, you know, just grew up in a small town in Wisconsin where life was just slower paced and simpler than it is here in like a place like Austin. But it was a gift. It was like the ability to ride our bikes wherever we wanted and skateboard and, you know, do what we wanted to do. Right. I've always felt this sort of like burning desire to go chase the world. Like, and I don't know exactly what that's going to end up looking like for me. But I just keep saying yes to things and seeing how they serve me. I really think that my parents ingrained that in me at a very young age.
Yeah. To expand more about, you don't necessarily know what that's going to look like for you, because that seems like a confliction to like you having a solid vision that I've actually like seen is really cool to like actually have above your sock drawer or something or other.
Yeah. So like I have a vision for my life, but the thing that I think most people fail to recognize is regardless of how specific my vision is, it's never going to go the exact way you had it planned. Like that's just life, right? Even if you're going in your car today and you're going to the grocery store, you might have a plan for when you'll get there and when you'll leave, but like the red light or the car accident or the phone call or whatever, it changes the course a little bit. And I actually find joy in the course changing, but understanding the course is changing for me, not to me.
Yeah, certainly.
So like when I say like I don't know what the world has in store for me, it's like I have a vision of what I want my life to look like, but I'm also open to it being something different. Like because it's limiting to think that that's going to be my plan, that's going to be my vision, right? Well, then that's all that it stops with. And so if I don't dream big enough, if I don't think big enough, if I don't challenge myself enough, if I don't surround myself with the right people, then I hit a ceiling and then I'm stuck. And so I try to like leave everything open to see what else is possible, what else could be true. And then be like very unattached to the actual things themselves, right?
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people choose to live with judgment, and I actually choose to live with curiosity. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what could that be? How could that serve me? What else is possible? What else could be true, right? And like just asking questions rather than going like, this sucks or this is great, because then you're stuck. You're fixed in a moment in time.
For sure. Can you expand more on that judgment piece? Because that's a huge thing I found. And specifically what I'm like asking and like getting on is when GoBundance or the like, or just even like a goal setting of, hey, I'm going to do this thing. It has to be this or nothing. I have to have the, $10 million software company or nothing. And a dollar less is like absolute failure for being really hard on yourself. Or it's just like not good enough sort of thing. And at some point it's really just, my opinion, at some point, just making up like kind of random numbers of like, oh, I need to be this or want to be this sort of thing. But if anything, it's more like the person that you become along the way. But that judgment piece of it has to be this or not, I think is a beautiful, beautiful healing, of which, at least for myself, helped me then just be aware of joy and then like experience it sort of piece.
So I was listening to a podcast this morning actually, and it was Danica Patrick was talking.
Cool.
And she was just referencing how like so many people think life is all about winning. But if you look at professional sports, there's nobody that wins every time. Like, and she was comparing it to racing. She was talking about NASCAR, and she's like, there's 39 races or 40 races in a year. And one of her good friends had like the ultimate season, and he won 10 times. Well, that means he failed 29. He lost 29. So he could either choose to be in judgment of, I suck, I lost, we do this, we do that, or he could choose to remain in curiosity and say, what do we need to do differently for the car next week? How do I need to drive differently? How could I feel my body differently? And by residing in curiosity, I find that there's much more awareness that exists rather than answers. And I think answers for me are limiting, because it's just like, do we paint the house white or black? You make a choice, now that's it, it's done, it's painted, right? But, like what color should we paint the house such that it brings us endless energy? Or, what do I need to fuel my body with such that I can drive for 4 hours longer than everybody else can, or be sharper than everybody else can, right? And so it's just recognizing that life is actually full of failure and loss, and that's like the greatest gift we can have. So many people look at it like, oh, I lost, I failed, I'm going to quit. But actually that's where like the beauty of life lies, like, because at the end of the day, winning is sort of empty. Like it's cool to win and it's great, but then you kind of look around and go like, okay, now what do I do? Like, I've hit the pinnacle. And so like I really think that if we remain in curiosity rather than judgment, and we remain open to failure being a gift and losses being a gift, then we truly can find this sort of limitless version of life. And to me, that sounds really fun.
How do you think that's possible? Is that just like hearing these words? Is there like an exercise? Does that take time, or an event combination? Like what's that formula? What do you think or feel?
Look, I think it's impossible to do 100% of the time.
Well, it's true.
I'm never going to try to be perfect, right? I know that I'm a human being and I have emotions and feelings and thoughts, and those things are going to pop in and go out. But I tell people all the time, like, the only difference between a rut and a grave is how long you choose to stay there. So the way I think
the quotes.
The way I think it's possible, man, is I think you surround yourself with the right people. I think you have a vision for your life, and I think you practice gratitude. And if you do those things, and then understand the power of question, I think you will reside in a limitless life. And the way you do that is you practice. And so, the people I've coached, the people I've worked with like yourself, it's ask 3 questions about everything, right? Somebody asks us a question, our immediate response is, let me give you the answer. Let me give you the answer. Let me give you the answer.
Yeah.
But instead of it was like, why are you asking me that question? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
What else do you think is possible? Now you have so much more awareness, so much more data by which you can both collaborate on and decide from.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's like a learned behavior. You're going to have to learn that. You're going to have to practice that.
Yeah.
But when you understand the power of question, I believe you will find much more freedom in life and what's possible.
Yeah. Can I share how I've found those two? So I found that through anxiousness. Yeah. That's been a big thing I've been aware of, and like anxious attachment style. And then also just like the pressure of things of either that I put on myself or other things that have really been kind of that separator piece to take those moments and be like, hey, like I do just want to give an answer, give that sort of thing. Yeah. But I've also found like in that space I give, I also then eliminate, maybe just reduce this thing called the ego. Yeah. And so, through practice as well as, the book Ego is the Enemy has been transformative, through my just career and also like personality to be like, oh, I know why you're asking me that. It's because of this. Yeah. Yeah. Well, do I actually? Or also, is there another alternative, a third, fifth dimension that like maybe we could actually like go do this, right? And you've talked about this in other podcasts and rooms of like win-win-wins type thing. Yeah. And it's not just like, great, like I want this, you want that. Let's go in the middle, or like 60-40, big, kind of challenge you sort of thing. But there could be like a third alternative that's exponentially better than maybe others or things like that. So
yeah, look, the magic all of us as humans are seeking lies in the work we're unwilling to do.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like when you feel anxiousness or you feel pressure or you feel stress or you feel all of those things, you have 2 choices. You can either run from it or you can run toward it. Yeah. And I have just found it to be so much more fun to run toward it and to lean into it and to embrace it and look at it as a gift, right? Like a lot of people will say, wow, like I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm scared. And they look at that as a negative thing. Yeah. But at the same time, like we're so fortunate and blessed to not be looking for water today in Africa with it being 105 degrees and having to walk 4 hours one way and 4 hours the back. Like that's pressure. Yeah. That's anxiousness. Because if you don't get that water, your family's not going to make it.
For sure.
The pressure and the anxiety we're feeling on a day-to-day basis, like I don't want to like say it doesn't matter and it doesn't exist, but it's just such a gift. Like it's just, we're so fortunate to have those things. And so I always try to run at those things. Like a lot of the times I'll tell people, like when I start to feel scarcity pop into my mind, I choose the opposite. So like the ranch is a great example, right? Okay. Like the animals aren't cheap, the barn's not cheap, the fencing isn't cheap, like none of it's cheap, right? Yeah. And so like there's moments where I'll bounce back into scarcity, like, oh, maybe I don't need to do that, or maybe I shouldn't do that. But I truly believe if you say yes to things and allow money to not necessarily just flow to you and stop, but instead flow through you, then more can flow to you. Yeah. And so when I start to feel those like thoughts or those actions, or my body starts to tense up, or my heart rate spikes, or my HRV goes down, whatever those things might look like for me, I embrace them and run toward them because they're just a gift and they're all just snapshots in time. And there will be some point in my life where I look back, maybe I'm on my deathbed and I'm just dying to be back in the pressure cooker that was business or the ranch or the investment or whatever I was dealing with, because the life support machine is not cutting it for me anymore. Sure. Right. And so I understand everything is a moment in time. Everything is a flash in time. And I just chase it. I just go after it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it'd be awesome to go through this, these like kind of concepts I've at least created in kind of the brand in the book. And they're like 6 sort of stages, right? So the first is this idea of like understanding yourself. And so what have you found either like tactically or just through experiences to really like understand yourself more, right? Of like, not just like that, I mean, maybe even like, hey, I can wake up at this time, or I enjoy waking up at this time, or that kind of like thing. Or even just like how you operate with business or things like that. What was that process and also like kind of tactically like been like for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I would say is, I don't know that we ever truly understand ourselves. And so like I am gaining an understanding of myself and my patterns and my habits and my actions and where they've came from.
Yeah, sure.
And now I'm having this opportunity in my life to choose where I go with them. I don't have to hold on to them. I can change. I can pivot. I can be something different.
Like emotion, the emotional wheel and things like that we've done.
Yeah, just like different stories, different framings, different concepts that, like society puts on us, family puts on us, schools put on us. And it's not good. It's not bad. It's just a perspective, right? And so for me to understand myself, I try to really stay in tune with like my energy. And my energy, not necessarily from like, you know, I'm not as good at tracking like the strain and stuff like that as you are probably, but my energy more from like a burning candle inside of me.
Okay.
Like, is the flame bright or is the flame dull?
Okay.
Is the flame close to going out or is the flame burning brighter than it ever has? And for me, that might mean like, wow, I'm feeling like my soul is a little crushed today, right? So maybe it's 5 extra minutes laying in bed with my daughter while I'm reading books to her. Or maybe it's a walk after dinner, or maybe it's a date night with my wife. Or maybe it's an extra 3 minutes in the cold plunge to just hurt a little bit and understand that hurt's okay. But I do a lot of that through journaling. I do a lot of that through reflection. And I do a lot of that through asking questions of other people. So like we just had our leadership team meeting here in Austin 2 weeks ago with the Abundance team. And like the first thing I asked every single one of them was like, how was it? How could I do better? What would you have liked to see different? What went well? What could have been different? And I do all of that because like the best feedback I can get is from people I look up to and trust and believe in. And that's the team members I have on this team and this organization.
In their expertise. Because that's been another thing I've picked up on is like, it's not just like, hey, what do you think about like this or that? It's like, if you don't respect or trust or like need someone's opinion, perspective, or experience on something, then, I mean, my viewpoint is like, you don't ask, but even if you are given that like feedback or opinion, it's like, great, like I'll hold on to that or like think of that. But like, it doesn't like relate, or it doesn't like get, you know, processed. It received, not processed.
Look, I think there's this concept of never take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. So like if you're around people and let's say you're on a health journey and the person you're around isn't healthy, are you really going to ask them what you should order for lunch? And so I'm always trying to find feedback from my experts. And growing up, I always thought there was going to be this like one mentor, this one expert for me. And ironically, our son's name is Bodhi. But let's say this expert or this guru is sitting under the Bodhi tree, right? Like the beautiful monk-looking tree. I always thought that I would find that person. And what I recognized is that person doesn't exist for all things, for me. For many people, it's spiritual and it's God, and that's great. I'm exploring my spirituality right now, and that's a fun journey. But for me, it's like the person I look up to for golf is going to be different than the person I look up to for business, who's going to be different than the person I look up to for relationship, who's going to be different than the person I look up to for parenting, who probably isn't the rancher that's going to give me advice on cattle. And so I have all of these different mentors, my quote unquote board of directors that are constantly like, okay, I have this, where do I go? Where do I go? Where do I go? Right. And I'm constantly just trying to seek feedback. And the number one way I do that is I use my eyes and ears in direct proportion. A lot of people find comfort in talking. And the beautiful part about that is people will tell you everything if you just are willing to listen. So I ask questions, and my favorite button on my phone is the mute button. Like I will literally ask questions and hit mute and just listen to people go. Now this is dangerous with Grandma. Grandma's an amazing human. She's 88, love her to death, but that lady could talk your ear off all day without you asking a single question. But there's moments in time for that, right? Because she has wisdom, she has knowledge, she has awareness that she's giving to me and she's bringing to me. So, you know, I'm always just trying to remain curious. I'm always trying to be a student. I'm always trying to listen. And then I collect as much data, as much information as I can, and then I come up with my own awarenesses and my own choices, and then I choose whatever I want in my life.
It reminds me in some ways of Matthew McConaughey talking about how like his hero is like 5 or 10 years like in the future sort of thing, and like that person in a way like kind of has those answers, if you will, and like kind of be your future self now sort of piece. One thing I've want to like go back to, because I'm curious about, because there've been different seasons in my life where it's like, money flows, it's energy, and like, you know, a little bit of hoopla, but like it just makes sense. Like anytime I've been like on the energy, it's just worked out and been great, and anytime I've been off it, it's just been like catastrophic or not as beneficial. Like as you're thinking about like spending money for these things that are just enjoyable, you know, kind of fun stuff, like has it been, the thing that came to mind in a thought is like discernment is not the difference between good and bad. It's actually the difference between good and almost good. Right. And so, again, for my understanding of myself of like anxious attachment style, I'm like, oh, whoa, and we can put this and like water slide and like, you know, just, I can think of 1,000 things. Right. But that actually might not be serving. And certainly my vision and my own discernment can like keep that. as you're thinking about like money or spending, or even this concept of investing, right? Investing in yourself, right? Even in like a GoBundance or, other type programs or things, or, in a camera, right? To record a podcast, like kind of stuff. That's an investment of sorts. Like, how is that, how have you found that energy to be flowing to the right reasons and things? Like, is that discernment? Is it vision? Is it both? Is it something else? Like, how do you kind of keep it all energized and like going in a good path as you best know today? Because you may, do things that aren't as good.
Yeah, look, money's just a dirty piece of paper. At the end of the day, it's just a dirty piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just this piece of paper that thousands of hands have touched, cash registers have touched, and now it's in our pocket.
Yeah.
And so we think we have this thing because we have a dirty piece of paper in our pocket.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's all about joy. It's all about memories.
Cool.
And so when I'm trying to make decisions, it's like really like, what is the memory making moment with this?
Yeah.
With the ranch, it's all about what is the memory making moment with it. With the opportunity inside of GoBundance, it's all about like, how am I going to bring my family along on the journey such that we can have memories and make memories?
Yeah.
And I really am not attached to the money. Money is good for the good it can do. But money's not going to give you a hug as you're dying and say thank you for the great life.
For sure.
It's just going to flow right away from you, right?
Yeah.
And so I literally look at money as just pure energy.
Yeah.
And again, the more I let it flow through me, the more it continues to flow to me.
Yeah.
And I think if we get lost in this story or this narrative of like hoarding money or having to have all of this money,
mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, what we tell God or the universe, whatever you believe in, is this is all I can handle, nothing more.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to get lost in that place. That doesn't mean I don't save money. That doesn't mean I'm not building a war chest to make investments. Like, none of that stuff. Like, I'm still doing all of those things.
Yeah.
But I'm not hoarding it for the position of I'm going to hoard this and make sure my family's safe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoarding it from the point of view of like, how can I do an even greater good with this money? How can I change more lives? How can I make a bigger impact? How can I make more memories for my family, my friends, people around us, the chickens behind us? Like, how can I do things that are going to bring joy through memory?
Yeah.
And again, like if I find myself ever getting too attached to things, I'll just let it go. Right. So a great example is there was a day a couple weeks ago where I was like feeling a little tight around money and I had to go get my hair cut. And I was feeling so tight around money, I went to Cost Cutters. So like
I go to Great Clips.
Yeah, so like literally it's like a $15 haircut,
yeah.
right? And I was just like, I can't spend $40 for a haircut. That's stupid. That's foolish.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there getting my haircut, and I was just processing like, why am I so like afraid right now? Like, what's holding me back? Like, what's going on? And I just processed all of it.
Yeah.
And as I went to check out for the haircut, I gave the hair cutter $100 tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the guy's like, wait. Do you know? Did you add? I'm like, yeah, I know. And I just walked away.
Yeah.
Because I was telling my subconscious mind, I was telling my being, my spirit, my soul, like, if you hoard this, you don't have the ability to gift it to others.
Certainly.
And so, like, I walked out of that haircut with actually a decent haircut for $15 or $115, but actually a decent haircut. But I walked out of it more with a message to myself of like, cool, we were in that scarcity for a moment in time.
Sure.
The rut in the grave, we didn't choose to stay there. We worked our way out of it. And the way we worked our way out of it was through action and through discomfort. Like I lean into the discomfort of like hitting 2 zeros after the 1 on a tip pad. Like that was fun.
Yeah.
And I made an impact on that human's life that day and maybe the next day and maybe the day after that. And if I didn't, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Because it made an impact on mine.
That same story, experienced a different way. So that's part of the reason why I love going to Great Clips. I also don't understand like how the difference between like a Great Clips and like a barber could really be. Maybe it's my own ignorance. It's also just I don't care.
Yeah.
Hair's hair, it'll grow back, or you can wear a hat. It's to say that I gave like this woman this generous tip.
Yeah.
And she ended up calling me like a day or two after and was just like, hey, I'm not supposed to do this, but I just wanted to say like how much that meant to me and like thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder for me of like that like hesitant moment of like, giving that tip, especially when it's going directly to people for that impact and for that piece. Like that could be, maybe that sign that they're looking for of like, hey, like life's, glim and deek and just like, I don't know what it's for, but I like got to show up to work. Like that could just alter their perspective or their life. Like there's this concept within this brand of the Investor's Guide to Joy of like every like content piece that like I'm doing, the like kind of expectation and the threshold is to change someone's life by 1 degree such that like by doing it, their life would like never be the same. And not to say like every haircut's like $100, kind of things, right? But it's just, I think the big takeaway from me, at least in that moment, in those moments, is like the moments that like matter, right? So like you're also saying in the sense of grace, like again, I've been doing that recently too, and it's cool to hear it's not just me, right? Because sometimes we think it's just grinding and more, and like, you know, starting the next year on like December 1st, you know, kind of stuff, right? But really going with the flow, you know, of things. And I think that's then a beneficial way to like understand more about yourself, is then also giving to others and think and feel what that is like for yourself. Wow, I do love like giving more away. I wish I had more money to, you know, do the same, or more time or more talents, like kind of thing. The next piece of this kind of like brand process is really controlled situations. Reason being is because, well, you can control them. And you've said control a couple times. It seems like control is either something you have and you want maybe less of, or you're like okay with the amount you have. But talk to me more about some of the controlled situations you've gone through. I mean, it's again been the 29-29 thing. But what challenges have you like intentionally put yourself through for a set amount of time? My viewpoint is like intentionally. It's not like I'm going to grind to the nth degree, because that, in my viewpoint, is unhealthy. But like, what kind of challenges have you put yourself through over the years, or even you're going to put yourself through, that have really like helped kind of form and shape you and give you good perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them, because I just love them. I love the challenges. I love the suck. I love the hurt. I love
Are they
the pain.
daily, or like, you know?
I try to do something every single day that slightly scares me. 3 minutes and 60 seconds or 4 minutes rather than 3 minutes and 33 seconds, or whether that's turning the sauna to 211, not 207. Like, just do something that challenges you, something that pushes you, something new, something that scares you. And I try to do that every day. Now, am I perfect? No, not at all.
Are you like tracking it?
No, I don't track it, but it's more of a feeling. It's more of an awareness.
Mindset,
like,
perspective,
you know,
Could you go?
Yeah, and it's almost like this like caged animal inside of me that's like, hey, we didn't get out today. Hey, we didn't get out today. And like, we got to get out, right? And so it's just trying to find little things throughout the day that challenge me, that scare me, that push me. Maybe it's that extra sprint on the treadmill, or that extra 5-pound weight here, or whatever it might look like. But then I do things intentionally throughout my year that are on my goals. So this year I'm going to go skydiving. Last year I did 29.
Cool. Where are you going to go skydiving? Do you know yet?
Whatever's easiest for me, like proximity. Like, I don't care about the view or any of that stuff. I just want to jump out of the plane.
I skydove in Colorado. And it was cool to see a bunch of like flat land and like kind of the mountains. Cool to experience, and the thought has been, if I were to do it again, like doing like a tropical, cool, unique type place. Like, sure, there's like the Dubais of the world. I've also then been like, are the safety standards the same? Here's the thing, I've not like looked into it. So perspective of my own, of like, you may not care about the view when you do it, but at least from someone who's done it, like, it was like, oh, well, now I kind of want to do it again, but in a different way. So however it resonates with you, of like, do the thing you actually want to do, even though you may, if you care slightly about it, like, do it, like, kind of thing.
Yeah, look, I hear that, and I totally understand that, but I believe in the power of momentum. And so if I get too lost with a third kid on the way, 2 other kids, a wife, work requirements, all this stuff, like, in trying to coordinate the perfect example, all of that does is become an excuse for me not to do it. And so I'm trying to just choose what's hard, but in an easy way, right? So I'm sure we'll go to like San Marcos and jump out of an airplane that barely flies, and we'll be fine, right? I'm sure it'll be just totally fine. And it would be beautiful to go skydiving in Dubai. It'd be incredible. But then I've got to get to Dubai. I've got to be away from my family. Or I got to bring my family with me. Like, there's just all these other things that happen. And so for me, where I've found the most peace is just choosing things that are easy, that show up for me. A great example is I wrote a bull a couple of years ago. And it just showed up through an event that actually I think you were attending and I spoke at. And somebody said, what do you do that scares you? I'm like, this year I'm going to ride a bull. They said, how are you going to do it? I said, I have no idea. Somebody came up to me after and said, my cousin's uncle's brother's son rides bulls. And the next thing you know, I'm in West Texas riding a bull. Now, there's classes, there's events, there's all these things I could have done, but all of those things had barriers for me, which makes it much easier for me to say no to it, which means it doesn't then get to come into my life. So I just try to avoid barriers. I try to break down those walls. Now, I still do things intentionally. I still try to do things like that are purposeful, but it doesn't always get to be this perfect, glorious situation, because I'd rather have it in my life than not.
And that's kind of how I've like built sort of these 6 sort of steps in recognition and just awareness of like, that's just to say like you understand yourself so well to the point that like when you do these controlled things, you're then saying, hey, this is good, this is not good, this is, you know, worth it, not worth it, like sort of pieces. Otherwise, it would be like, yeah, sure, I'm going to go to Dubai. And again, it's just kind of this like oh, I like need to do that, and you're just kind of going with the flow. It's this idea of like, if you don't have like your vision or you don't have a routine, like you'll get someone else's or someone else will make it for you.
That's right.
Sort of piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How does that then transition into, third kind of piece is uncontrolled situations where, just out of the blue, someone's, either saying things or doing things, or maybe it's macro, micro, like kind of stuff. What does that look like in terms of like taking that in, giving awareness, to your point, asking questions, things like that?
Yeah, look, everything is controllable. So even if you're in a situation where someone's...
Do you believe that with like everything?
Yeah, because even if you're in a situation...
Is it a forcing or just like a holding?
It's just
or
a choice. All it is a choice.
Okay. I just found that, myself, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
I used to believe that I had to have enough cash flow and enough resources and all this stuff to like go build software, or like just leave kind of corporate and do a podcast, or, raise funds to oil and gas syndications we have, a number of other things. What I really found is that was just my lack of belief and either in my skills, abilities, or resources, or my belief that I like should do this or it's called upon me, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote an article called "A Fish Climbs a Tree," inspired by you saying like you'll find a way or make a way.
Yeah.
Where I was like, yeah, a fish climbing a tree would totally find a way or make a way,
Right.
So for me, anytime I hear control, like I almost just want to like challenge people on it to be like, okay, is it an actual like control you're like gripping, or is it more just like, I don't know, if you ever picked up a chicken, you just like have it, right? And it's kind of moving around or whatever. And there's still like control on it, but you're still like letting it sort of flow. So in the sense of like control, anytime I hear someone think of control, I think of like my former self and just how like I always thought I had to have enough cash flow or assets or something before I did these unknown kind of things. Yeah. So like, what do you kind of like define control? How does that like show up for you? Because I think some people just have a different definition or experience with it. And some of it I believe is like truly unhealthy, and some of it is just hey, we're just making this like sandbox and we're playing in the sandbox, like kind of thing. That's my definition.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. And a lot of people have a definition of control that sort of has a negative connotation around it, right? Oh, like you're a control freak. That's a bad thing.
Sure.
And for me, one of the greatest gifts that we have as humans is we can change the definition for things. Like, unless we're Webster and we're writing the actual dictionary, then we probably have a hard time, right? But for a lot of people, control is like this like possessive thing. And for me, control is just the power and ability of choice.
Okay.
And so when I say I want to have control over things, I have control over everything. Like I can choose how I look at things. I can choose the way I respond to things. I can choose what I choose. I can choose what I don't choose.
Yeah.
So for me, control is just the power of choice.
Okay.
And I learned once I was up at the Cincinnati Reds ownership group's office.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I asked them how they think through making investments and taking risks.
Yeah.
And I thought I was asking this like really deep question. They were going to give me this great spreadsheet that analyzes risks and calculates everything.
Sure,
and,
take it home.
Yeah, this like, 70-year-old guy leans back in his chair and laughs at me. I'm like, oh, great, here we go. And he looked at me and he said, risk is a lack of knowledge and a lack of controls.
Yeah.
And I remember like just hit me like a ton of bricks in that moment. Like from an investing perspective, yes, but from a life perspective too.
Yeah.
And a lack of controls is just our inability to make a choice in the moment. And that, generally speaking, stems from a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And so for me, I can control everything because I can control how I respond to everything. I can control how I choose everything. I can't control if I'm going to get cancer or not going to get cancer, but I can control what I put in my body such that I can avoid cancer to the best of my ability.
Certainly.
And then I can make the choice, if I ever do get cancer, I'm going to fight it. And where am I going to go to fight it, right? So I have control.
Yeah.
And again, like for me, control is power of choice.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great perspective piece. And have you found that like build over time, or was there just like an aha moment, or you just had that perspective then and that was the click thing? Or
it was in that moment. It was just like this aha of like, that's amazing from an investing perspective. You're so true. And if you actually take that, encompass that into all of life, that's all risk is. It's the lack of knowledge and a lack of control.
Yeah, certainly. This fourth part is then this concept of like loving the walk.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I also say, as you give that definition of control, it's then to be like, hey, like I'm letting things, flow and be, with, and I have control of, like loving the walk. So like from what you just shared in the sense of like control, I've then experienced to say like, you then have the capacity to be like, hey, like I had this bad thing happen to me, like your Achilles or whatnot, right from the bull.
Yeah.
Okay. And this, I'm still going to do this, or, can't do CrossFit the number of times you plan on doing it, right? But you're going to change and those sort of pieces. So like for you, like this idea of like loving the walk through the process of life, and like grace kind of comes into that picture in my viewpoint. Like what does that experience been? Because my viewpoint is like, that's almost like it's the biggest piece that people tend to, I think, like almost forget. And it's almost like the longest too, right? Especially if you're going like an 8-figure kind of piece. Like it's just being consistent with something over a long period of time and loving all the pieces of it. Oh man, we just had this employee quit. We had these bad things happen. And to your earlier points, it's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, look, the hero's journey is about putting one foot in front of the other, day in, day out. And so, do I love the journey every day? No. Like, there's days where I'm like frustrated, miserable, sad, depressed, whatever words you want to use, right?
Yeah.
But I understand that it is a marathon and not a sprint. And so when I ruptured my Achilles riding the bull, there was moments where I was frustrated and I was trying to carry my newborn child on a knee scooter, and like it was hard and it sucked. But Steve Jobs said that we can never connect the dots looking forward. We can only connect them looking backwards. And so like in those moments of frustration or anxiety or disappointment, I just always remind myself, like, I will be able to look back on this and see what was the gift in it, or what was the opportunity in for it. And for me, I actually ruptured it twice, and there was a lot of gifts and lessons in that, some of which I've actually chose to not listen to, right? Like, so I wanted to get back as fast as I possibly could. Probably picked the wrong therapist. The guy didn't know what he was doing. Re-ruptured in physical therapy, right? I was pushing the status quo. I was challenging the recovery time. And if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I can do that because I have the resources and everything. Like I can do that. If you're just this random Matt King, it's hard to do. Now that was like a lesson for me that I have not necessarily adopted in all aspects of my life, because I understand that that's just part about moving with pace. Like sometimes things are going to happen. But if I can look back on that moment in time, like really rupturing my Achilles, like kind of helped kickstart this journey of health for me. It really helped kickstart this journey of presence for me and like slowing down a little bit for me. And so again, everything in my life is a gift. It's just a matter of when will I recognize it as one.
Certainly. You recently talked to Jamie Gruber, kind of, right? And so it reminded me also of like some of the things you were talking to him about too. So I'll just say like, like it was a good episode to kind of listen to. And in part of that too, and kind of a Go Abundance sort of change, and I would think probably like a change for yourself too, is just this idea of like via. So I think this is like where it would kind of fit in the journey piece of like loving the walk. I just give you the opportunity to kind of talk more about it because I think it's absolutely like imperative.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do with the Go Abundance is we're trying to impact men in deep and meaningful ways. Because if we impact a man, then he can impact his community, his family, his neighborhood, his business, and then that can ultimately change the world. And what gets me out of bed every day? Like, I want to change the world. I want to make a difference.
For sure.
And I don't want to make a difference so that there's a sign above the difference that says Matt King was here. Like, I want to make a difference so that I can sit in this beautiful rocking chair at this ranch as I die and go like, okay, cool. Like, I did me. Like I did the best I could do. Like I can die proud. I can die happy. And most importantly, not die with the ghost of regret around me.
For sure.
And as we go through this journey of helping men continue to be better men, getting that 1% better every day, the team and I have come up with this concept called VIA, which stands for vulnerability, intimacy, and accountability. And so we're trying to break down the walls and the barriers around people. We're trying to do it in an intimate setting, meaning like boardroom type groups where like board of advisors giving feedback, giving advice.
For sure.
And then we're trying to incorporate accountability because so many of us say we want to make a change, we want to do this, we want to do that. But then nobody ever follows up with us and we just kind of lose sight of the path and then we just fade away. So for me, it's about doing that VIA and doing it at scale and really focusing in on each core aspect of VIA, which is, again, the vulnerability, the intimacy, and the accountability.
And I've also found like curiosity is also beneficial with accountability. And what I mean by that is like, we've talked about how I've looked at like selling some of my, real estate in some way. And I'm like curious about it. And at one point I was like decisive on it through investigation, kind of waiting, timing sort of piece. But I've been curious about it, right? But then also like you've asked me like, hey, like, have you done that or how's that going, right? That wasn't, at one point, again, that was a decision. Now I'm being curious with it. And it's then like, oh yeah, you said you were like curious about, an Ironman or whatever, people might be curious about. And it's then following up on their own curiosity, be like, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that in a while, or I have thought about that numerous times. I just haven't done anything with it. Awesome. Then there's that space and place to then say, great, like I can now hold you accountable to that.
Right.
You've said you've been, going to quit your job for so long. Like what is that piece or part or timeline that like you're missing? It's like, I just need someone to give me like, a definite piece. One of my favorite things from like all the Go Abundance events I've been to, right, is when Andrew Freed was suggested to quit his job in like a certain amount of time. And it's just to say like, space or takes the amount of time that we like give it, essentially.
Yeah.
Parkinson's law, I believe it is. Yeah. And so if we think it's going to be like, 2 months, like it's going to be 2 months. Well, could it happen in 2 days?
Yeah.
Maybe not quitting the job, but like those kind of like things.
Right.
Which then gives you that perspective of like, what are you actually like living, and are you like living on purpose and living for, or are you just kind of like going through the motions, which at least I've in tune more of just like loving the walk kind of thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it's all about just the journey. You're on a journey.
Yeah. Just through the hills and on a ranch. Yeah.
Walk sounds too slow to me, but the journey sounds good.
Fast walk.
Yeah.
There's an interesting piece I read or came to understand around people who like fast walk tend to also live longer because longevity is actually tied to like the strength of our legs. So if you're fast walking, that's different than just walking. I was like, great. Give me a greater appreciation for my girlfriend. And her fast walking.
There you go.
And so it's cool how different perspectives just change like your outcome.
Yeah.
It's cool. You also talk about via and like the sense of like community and impact, whatnot, because that's actually the fifth principle is this idea of like being a ruler, right?
Yeah.
So ruler in the sense of like, within yourself, right? Discernment, knowing what's good for you, things like that. And then your community as well as, your career. What have you found, like either, because there's also been things I've listened to, right? From, you again, this like past week that I just want to like connect the dots of this idea of like leaders leading leaders, right? Within GoBundance and even for your position in yourself, like what has being like a ruler been like for yourself, for, your family, for your community, for your career?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective to put the word ruler instead of leader. It carries it's a cool shift.
Yeah.
For me, it's been a fun challenge because it's very easy to tell yourself what to do and then ignore yourself or do it. What doesn't matter, right? But it takes a different level of communication and skill to be able to ask somebody else to do something or tell somebody else what needs to get done or help them co-create the vision.
Empower them. Yeah, for sure.
And so for me, like being a leader is important. Like it's important in everything I do. I want to be a leader. And then what I recognized on the journey was like it was different to be a leader than a leader of leaders. And I was like, wow, being a leader of leaders is way more challenging, way more difficult, and way more rewarding.
Yeah.
And so what leading leaders looks like is it's surrounding yourself with people who aren't just going to say yes. It's surrounding yourself with people who are going to challenge the status quo. And it's surrounding yourself with people, candidly, that are more talented than you. And seeing how you can co-create things together and lead one another through the journey such that you can have whatever you desire. And I think like really the ultimate test of leadership is, can you lead leaders? Like, leading followers, it's not easy, but it can be learned pretty quickly. Like leading leaders, I have found in my journey is hard. It's humbling. It requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires a lot of power to communicate and listen and comprehend and ask good questions. And then it requires a lot of humility and just going like, okay, that's a good perspective. Like, how can we apply that? That's a good point, right?
What would you do in this?
Yeah. So it's been a fun journey, and candidly, I think the journey is just getting started, right? Like as we work through life, or the walk as you called it, we start to bump into these ceilings, and we know that there's this alternative dimension or this other reality on the other side of the ceiling, but we can't see it. But we can like maybe feel it, like we know it's there. And so as I like bump into the ceiling of leading leaders, like I can feel that it's there, and I'm like, wow, whatever's on the other side of that's going to be even more challenging. It's going to be even more rewarding. It's going to be even more beneficial for the people I communicate with and work with. And I don't know what it's going to look like. It might require me to fail a little bit. It might require me to succeed a little bit. It might require me to change coaches or hire a mentor or find a new peer. Like I'm not sure. But I do know that I'm on this journey of growth and leadership, and that it's only going to get more fun, more rewarding, and more challenging as I go.
I found through a series of books as well as just my own experience, like the concept of then like a ruler to say is also that like they have that leadership capacity, but they may not as well, right? So there's also the downfall of the ruler, kind of that greedy, Odin, sort of like Lord of the Rings, sort of piece, right? He was like consumed with all the gold and the dragon, right? And it's separating those out, and they could be mutually exclusive, but they may not be, and ruling from a sense of like taking in input. So just like you were saying of like, hey, these people are thinking this, family's thinking that, and my decision's this. Hey, that's not what we wanted or needed. It's like, well, actually, like this is the path we're going. Like, come along and leading them there. But taking in those inputs, I found just there's been that separation of like leaders and rulers that are just trying to like I mean, GoBundance and other
Yeah.
places are like member driven, right? And so if we're leading, it's like, oh, we'll take all the inputs and we'll go here.
Yeah.
Ruler, from my like definition thought, is like, hey, we'll take all those inputs and we may go there.
Yeah.
We may also build the Model T, even though you're requesting a faster horse.
Yeah. I
type
love
thing.
that, man.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
As you know, we kind of grow being, you know, rulers, leaders, etc. Right? In all these sort of aspects, we then have this concept, and the last stage is the sage.
Yeah.
So it's then, hey, I've been there, done that, I've experienced that, I know someone, things like that. How have you found that to really come up in your life? And you know, you've mentioned before, like could be through, you know, generosity and stewardship of, you know, time, talents, and treasure. Do you feel like you're like in that even stage of sorts, or what would it then maybe look like when you are at that stage? Is it, you know, sitting in these rocking chairs here, just going back and forth? What does that look like or feel like? And kind of what's that legacy sort of piece that you would have as a sage?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I'll ever hit that stage.
Okay. Why so?
The concept of sage to me is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's also delusional.
Okay.
And it's delusional from my perspective, from the point of view of like, there's always somebody that knows something more than I know about something else that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never view myself as a person that's just going to be pouring in knowledge and wisdom. And when you say sage, I experience the old man in a rocking chair.
Yeah, sure.
Like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I don't think I have the capacity or capabilities to do that because I'm just such a curious person.
Yeah.
Like a great example is I was going through an airport one night, and you know, I was just like, went from one meeting to another meeting, and I'm overnight at one place before the meeting the next day, and like, you know, most people be like, wow, like you're leading all these rooms, like you got all the answers, and yet like there is this guy sweeping the floors and cleaning the floors of the airport. I have no idea how to drive that Zamboni or what wax to put on the floor or where to sweep or how, you know, like,
sure.
So like, who am I to give him advice?
Yeah.
Like, actually, I am seeking advice and counsel from him.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I'm always on this mission of like, I can learn something from everybody.
Yeah.
And look, like I've got perspectives and point of views that I'm happy to share with people, but I don't know them to be true. I don't know them to be factual.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may have served me or they might be serving me and I might give you my perspective, but there also could be a better way. Yeah. There could be a different way. And for me, it's just, I don't envision myself being in a sage phase because ultimately that sounds to me limiting. And again, I don't want to be limited by anything.
Sure. Yeah. That's a different perspective, which is cool to hear and process and think about for myself.
It's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. For, so one impactful thing I had at, you know, your inner circle at your house, right, is this concept of the difference between 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs, right? Which from what I remembered was the difference is like the decisions they make, the time of which they make those decisions, and then also making those decisions over a longer period of time. Yeah. Like, how have you seen like entrepreneurs in general, and certainly like the men and women and what have you, like within Emerge, GoBundance, you know, Elite and Champions, like transform and change like over that time?
Yeah, so from my perspective, as you climb this like economic food chain, let's call it, right? Like this scoreboard of net worth, I have found or seen that the level of decision changes, the rate at which the decision changes, and then the delegation of the decision changes. So, you know, David and I talk about all the time that like millionaires ask, what do I need to do? Billionaires ask, who do I need to hire to do that for me? Yeah. And as you look at like a 6-figure entrepreneur, a 7-figure entrepreneur, an 8-figure entrepreneur, the 6-figure one is probably trying to decide what color to paint the walls. For sure. The 7-figure entrepreneur is trying to decide who to hire to paint the walls. And the 8-figure person is trying to decide who to hire, to manage who to hire, to manage who to hire. And then the walls get painted and they don't really give a shit. And the other thing I'll tell you is like, I think a lot of us on this journey feel the weight of decisions we make. And yes, there is weight there. Don't get me wrong. Like there are decisions that are very heavy that mean
sometimes
a lot.
Consequences. Yeah, sure.
But I think the heavier thing in a decision is the rate at which you make the decision. Yeah. Because
it stays there. Yeah.
Because then you have the ability to pivot quicker if it was quote unquote wrong. Right. Oh, this isn't serving us. We need to pivot. Whereas if we take 6 months to decide and then it's not serving us, now we're 8, 9, 10 months into the pivot. Right. And so I like to think that the better thing from a limitless perspective to do is to make fast decisions with confidence and understand that it won't always be right. But going back to the Danica Patrick thing, you aren't going to win every race.
Yeah.
But are you going to put yourself at least in a place to win it? And the way you do that, I believe, is you make decisions. You make decisions decisively, quickly. You lean on your board of advisors around you. You ask questions. You collaborate. But at the end of the day, you make decisions quick.
Yeah. Is it then to say quick, not in the sense of like, oh, I want this, like I'm going to do it, but it really seems like it's understanding, like, think of statistics, like the confidence in, oh, hey, I'm 90% confident, like this is going to then be the outcome. And it took me 2 days, 2 weeks, or maybe it took me 2 years to like make that decision, but I had to get enough data points or understanding for then me to make that decision. Like, is that kind of what you're thinking in terms of like having the information? Or?
No, it's about trusting your gut.
Okay.
We all know the answer inside of ourselves, but we all choose to ignore our guts. So it's not about taking time to gather more data. Like, yeah, of course, there's always opportunities to ask a couple questions to gather more data and gather more information. But like, can you get to a place where you're literally trusting your gut and your intuition? Mm-hmm. And you're using the feedback and the awareness you get through all of lessons that life has given you to help refine and mold that gut and that intuition.
Yeah.
But I think the more in one we can become with our intuition and our gut, the easier life will flow for us.
How do you take maybe other people's intuitions into yourself? So for example, like maybe managing, David's family office, it's then like, well, hey, he thinks maybe left, right, up, down, what have you, right? Whatever the cheat code is, right? And you're thinking maybe like slightly different. His intuition's a little this, your intuition's a little that, different thoughts and things. Like, how do you almost take someone's intuition, like, into consideration? Maybe that's not the best example, but just that concept of sorts, it was interesting to think about.
It depends on if I'm leading or being led.
Okay,
If I'm leading, I take someone else's intuition, ask a couple questions, and then if I want to empower that leader to continue to lead in our organization, I let them go their way.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, they have to learn and grow themselves, and I could be wrong. Like, and that's okay. And they could be wrong, and that's okay. I'd much rather continue to empower our team to make decisive decisions quickly than get them to a place where they have to ask me all the time, right? Like, there's this, the Proverbs of this concept of, you can feed a man a fish or you can teach him to fish.
Yeah.
And look, like, I'd much rather teach them to fish.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm being led and my intuition is telling me something other than the leader's intuition is telling them, I'll voice my opinion. I'll voice it again. I'll share the facts as to why my perspective is what my perspective is. And ultimately, it's the leader's decision to call the shots. Yeah. And so then I'll say, okay, great. Let's whatever you want to do, let's follow that plan. I've voiced my opinion. I've voiced it again. I've shared my perspective.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're leading this ship, so you call the shots. And I'll be all in for their mission. I'll be all in for their intuition. I'll be all in for their vision.
Yeah.
And if it serves us, amazing. And if it doesn't, there's no I told you so moments.
Sure.
But there is a little internal, like, good job, intuition, we were right if that happens. Because I do want to remind myself, like, don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, for sure. What have you, because you also have this perspective, what is that, like, 9-figure individual kind of like think, perceive, act, what have you? Is it different than an 8? Is it just leverage of sorts from an 8 sort of perspective? Or
yeah, I think it's leverage. Okay. And then I think there's like a different perspective of like what's possible. I think the 9-figure person doesn't live with limitations. It's more about like, who do I need to become? Who do I need to hire? What do I need to do to accomplish this, that, or the other?
Yeah.
And I think it's really like the ability to no longer see obstacles or roadblocks, but just see an alternative path.
Yeah, for sure. That's in a lot of ways sums up in the concept of like this investor's guide to joy, right? Of oftentimes I found, and even I lost myself, like trying to be that, person that has that sort of like net worth, when in all reality, I really just wanted to understand and learn and be my true best self.
Yeah.
That it's more what kind of person do I need to or want to become? And then irregardless of what I own, have, or can do, it's more that I am.
Yeah.
And not, those other things. And so I would definitely like echo that concept on like the idea of the 9-figure entrepreneur, if you will, right, for how we described it, is what I believe everyone should be doing, but not everyone focuses on.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of what sort of wolf of sorts are they feeding?
Yeah.
Are they feeding the joy, or are they feeding the kind of net worth piece?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thanks so much for having me on the ranch, spending time with me and hanging out. Love your perspective, how you show up, and also what you do, not only for my life, but also the men and women in GoBundance. So,
thanks, man. It's people like you that inspire me. Like, you guys are taking massive actions on your lives. You're chasing your dreams. You're trusting your intuitions. You're taking chances on yourselves. And I'm grateful to know you, grateful to call you a friend, and grateful to have you out here.
Appreciate you, brother.
Sweet, man.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hey, one last thing before you go. I wanted to share my mission while on this earth, and it's to help educate investors about different opportunities, share mindset tips on how to change our perspective, and different things to really experience more joy in our lives. If this resonates with you at all and you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and others to help grow the community around the Investor's Guide to Joy. Leaving a 5-star review also helps grow the show and get connected to more people and share our experiences along the way. Thanks so much for joining, and can't wait for you to listen to the next episode.